We're live with another installment of our Substack, Informed Resistance, where we unpack the fronts of the Trump administration. We dig in on the lawlessness, and we also talk about solutions and how to fight back. So I am thrilled to be joined today by Congresswoman Summer Lee, representing the 12th District of Pennsylvania. I'm sure known to many of you. Congressman Lee serves on the Oversight Committee and last year introduced important landmark legislation to rein in money in politics, her Abolish Super PACs Act, which I want to talk about today. She's part of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which we work with a lot. So just excited to dig in on everything that's going on, the different things that have been happening to our democracy over the last couple of weeks, and talk about potential solutions and things that we might do to counteract corporate influence that impacts working Americans. So, Representative, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I don't know how you intend to fit all of that into this, but excited.
Yeah, fair. We will get to what we can get to in our tight 20 minutes together. The first thing I wanted to talk about, folks, our listeners may know Public Citizen's mission is to take on corporate power. One of the things that we've been tracking closely is the decrease in corporate prosecution that we've seen in the Trump administration. Federal agencies have been canceling and freezing enforcement. We've tracked 166 corporate lawbreakers who are now, no longer receiving the consequences that they should. So I just wanted to ask you about this issue, the fact that corporate prosecution is dropping. What do you think the consequences of that are for all of us?
Yeah, first off, I just want to thank you all, right? This is always important work, but right now we understand how important it is that we have watchdogs, especially where we have an administration that has been very intentional about eroding our checks and balances. They've been intentional about truly punishing people who speak out. So we're just seeing protections erode for so many different institutions, people, individuals, organizations that used to stand as a safeguard. So what we're seeing and what you all, really, have shone a light on is this connection between corporations, corporate powers, and these oligarchs who we all watched at the inauguration, right? We're watching them basically cash in on all of the donations, all of the massaging that they have done with this administration. And it is the consequences are immense, right? One of the cases that you all have highlighted, right? We see, Boeing, right? For instance, major corporation, major company, a plane crash, a Boeing plane crash, 364 or so people died. And that is one of the cases that just, for instance, just disappear, right? There will be no accountability, not just or justice for the people, the souls that perished, the people around them, the industry. But what is the future implications of deregulation, the future implication of, you're able to get away with these sorts of neglect, crime, some of it, we don't get any answers, which means that we are less safe. We're seeing it with the crypto industry. We're seeing it with big tech. All of these billionaires, wealthy individuals who are able to buy access. They are able, directly into the White House, directly into the Oval Office, as we saw with Elon Musk. They're able to buy influence. They're able to buy media channels. Now they're able to buy their own two-tier system of justice. So what it means is that these folks are able to get away with anything that they want. These industries are able to curry favor, so that they get more favorable regulations or deregulation. They're able to buy more favorable outcomes in our judicial system. And all of that means that working people are left to fend for themselves.
That's right. So great to hear you lay it out like that. I couldn't agree more. I think the implications for regular Americans, even if you're not thinking every day about what it means to not see, an enforcement action carried through against any particular company, at the end of the day, that means that we are less safe. We don't have the, drug protections that we need. We don't have the air safety protections we need. We don't have companies feeling consequences. And so they're more likely to repeat their bad behaviors.
And rip us off, right?
Right.
One of the things that you all notice, right? Whole kind of sectors, right? So like the CFPB, right? Mm-hmm. To see that there are no longer enforcement actions for consumers who are ripped off means that consumers are more likely to be ripped off. That's us. That's everyday people, right? And these industries are already making money hand over fist. How much more do they need?
That's right. Well, no more. And I think that's a great segue to something you mentioned. A piece of this. Why are these enforcement actions being dropped? Why are these corporate CEOs and companies being treated differently? Why this oligarchy? It's the money in politics. It's the way they're able to interact with the system and buy this access and influence. So I wanted to ask you about your great bill, the Abolish Super PACs Act, and just hear a little more about it for our listeners, and then where you think it's heading.
Listen, I'm personally biased. I personally think that this is one of the most important bills, topics that we can take on right now, right? And I think that when you look at the Calais decision just last week, when we're looking at all the redistricting that really truly happened before last week's decision, right? Texas already descended us down this endless, arms race
Yeah.
to eroding our democracy. But all of it actually starts, or at least I think we can see a huge, decline in our democratic safeguards, where we saw Citizens United, where we see this flood of money into politics. Now, every election cycle, it gets harder and harder for everyday people to be represented, for the interests that we care about to be represented. And then we wonder why we have these majoritarian views on so many issues, right? You can throw a stone into a crowd and you would be hard to not hit somebody who cares about Medicare for all, to not hit somebody who does not believe that we should be spending $1 billion a day, bombing schools, children, infrastructure, human beings in Iran, while we cannot build infrastructure, schools, hospitals in America, right? People who believe that, we should have clean air and clean water, right? All these issues are majoritarian issues. The reason why we do not move on them is because politicians have to answer to their donors, to these industries, more than they answer to other people. But what it also means is it gets more and more and more and more expensive to compete. So even in the districts where we do actually eke out working class candidates, right? People who are reflective of the unique makeup of communities, of the interests that, surround them. Yeah, it's harder for those people to compete because now you get super PACs that get to go around the campaign contribution limits that, we already have. And they can spend millions. Last cycle, like in 2022, what year is it? 2024.
What is time? Yeah.
What is We saw two of the most expensive House primaries in history. It should not cost $27 million to win a House seat. But it also translates into so much other. We need to raise more money, which means your politician is spending more time raising money, which means that the more money they raise, the more influence they have. All of these things are just eroding, used to chip away at democracy. But now when you couple it with these cases that erode just very directly our ability to be represented, the resulting storm that we have can be irreparable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's so important that the Democrats have been focusing in on corruption and these connections and how the money is actually impacting what we can get done, what legislation can be passed on all these other topics that people really care about. So I wanted to ask you, it was great to see your legislation included in the Progressive Caucus's big new battleship agenda. It does seem like fighting corruption is going to be a core component of how folks are talking about what could happen in the next Congress. So love to hear a little bit about that, how you're thinking about fighting corruption as a theme and should Democrats have the gavels in the House, how does it connect to oversight and what you might actually want to do?
It has to be. It has to be. I think that this entire Congress, and obviously not just, the 119th Congress, but this Congress, we have really been putting an emphasis on what does it look like for us to actually craft an agenda that Americans can trust in, that Americans can get behind, and that actually meets the moment. And all roads lead back to the lack of trust that people have
Right.
in our institutions. It's for so many reasons, like from Epstein files to, insider trading to just the money in politics. All of those things just erode the faith that Americans have in our democratic systems, which then when we have an attack on our democratic systems, Americans are like, well, you know what? Maybe that's all right because maybe they should be attacked. So it's important that we lead on and focus on anti-corruption. And it will free us up to actually do and accomplish so much more on the back end after that, right? So we've been pushing, we want leadership to commit to this. When we talk about what our HR 1, 2, 3 would be, right? For so long, HR 1 has been John R. Lewis, Voting Rights Act. I think it should be expanded to include abolishing super PACs, to overturning Citizens United. I think it has to.
Yep.
Because what do we do now? Right? We have a Supreme Court that is just rogue. They used to use the phrase activist court, which they used to use it against us. And right now, we're looking at the long game that they played out, the long game, right? They wanted corporate takeover of our democracy. They waited, they built, they schemed, they wrote papers about it, and they executed it. They
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that we could enshrine Republican single-party rule, and they schemed, and they redistricted at the state levels, and they made it harder for us to build benches, and then they took over the judiciary, right? We have to know history, because when you know history, you can see the long game a little better. We have to play it too. So we have to do these foundational things, or else we're building on the same terrible foundation that we are already trying to now get away from. So I think that because I do care about healthcare, I do care about environmental justice, I do care about public education and affordability. I care about poor people and working class people having an equal playing field here. That means that we have to address these like foundational, democratic, institutional issues. We have to earn trust, or we don't get the gavels back in the first place.
Well, I love to hear you lay it out like that. I think someone in the chat was saying there are fires everywhere, and that is unfortunately true. We're looking at problems, attacks on our voting systems, attacks on nonprofits, attacks on free speech in universities, and attacks, that further exacerbate these problems of too much money in politics. So completely agree that putting this all into one package, talking about it as a holistic set of solutions is the way to go, and to also sell and explain, how if we fix these things, we can then deliver on other things that regular Americans are just, in dire need of right now. So just plus on everything you were saying. I want to shift us to a recent, speaking of things that are on fire, the DOJ, a recent bad move on their part was their indictment of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Talk about a defender of free speech, fighting for civil rights, legacy civil rights organization for, such a long amount of time, being criticized for what they've always done, providing information to the DOJ to help, winnow out and fight hate groups. So all of it, the hypocrisy is painful. Today is their arraignment, in that horrifying indictment. So I wanted to get your take on, why, you hear me yelling about it, but why do you think it is so important to defend SPLC and just fight this abuse of power, fight this DOJ?
I mean, for all the reasons that you laid out. And also, it is just like stacking on the corruption of this administration, right? This is the reason why I filed the impeachment articles against, former Attorney General Pam Bondi, because, we have been, to just a trough, a half a second, like we have been hit first, like into the corruption around Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
To really just unlock the just tangled web. Our DOJ and our FBI and our some of our largest, most powerful government officials, not just in the United States, but everywhere, right? Systemic failure, multi-systems failure, banks, institutions, countries. And then we have our own DOJ in the midst of it, of course, obstructing justice. But that wasn't it, right? A lot of people thought that was the only reason to impeach Bondi. But our third article talked about this, right? Prosecutorial, an abuse of her prosecutorial discretion, attacking their political enemies, right? Going after people who they think threaten Trump and letting people off lightly who donate to them. All of this is all in that same vein. So going after the Southern Poverty Law Center to I think a lot of people feels like they're actually going after the mechanism to defeat white supremacy. And right now, there is this just reclamation of white supremacist traditions, a reclamation of the boldness of white supremacy. The DOJ, the government itself used to use informants. They use informants on Black Power movements, on, queer movements. anti-war movements, on pro-women suffrage movements. They used them on all of those movements and never could figure out how to stop the KKK, right? They could never figure out how to stop, people marching in the streets with tiki torches. SPLC does that, has helped the DOJ, and are very upfront about what they do. This is a political attack. It is another line of political attacks. And I just want to be clear, it ain't about the SPLC. It's about you. It's about the donors. It's about everybody who supports work to stop white supremacy from growing. So it is a chilling effect, as everything that they do is. Everything they do is to try to stop the next person from speaking out, the next person from resisting, the next person from fighting back. Is why we said the attacks on universities, on free speech, chilling, trying to stop young people from engaging in the time-honored tradition of activism, of speaking out against abuse of power and abuse of our government. If they can stop young people from taking to the streets, then they can stop you from complaining. The tax on education, because an educated electorate is impossible to control. A tax on civics, on all of the apartments. All of these things go hand in hand. We cannot ignore that.
Agree. Silencing dissent is the hallmark of authoritarianism, and they are trying every avenue in ways that are reprehensible and attacking nonprofits. And in particular, this one in this moment just shows their hand and what they stand for and what they're actually trying to do. So just appreciate all of that. I know we are tight on time, but I want to ask you one more, which is, very connected. A part of this attack, have been other ways of attempting to get at the voting rights that we all have and depend on. We saw the Supreme Court's decision in Calais this week or last week, effectively gutting the Voting Rights Act. It's appalling, and we have to stand together in the ways you were just discussing. So I just wanted to hear how on the Hill, you and your colleagues are thinking about this. What are, eventual legislative remedies? How should we all be acting? I mean, it's horrifying, upsetting, and yeah, I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, I think there are a couple schools. This is a, 5-alarm fire. It is, right? It almost sounds like the boy who cried wolf, because it's like we've had so many alarmed fires since January 20th of last year. Intentionally so, right? It makes everything that is an escalation feel smaller than it would be. This is huge. This can reshape our democracy, period. Like, it can reshape the electorate. It functionally disenfranchises millions and millions of people. And there's a big emphasis on Black folk, because that's who they're attacking, right? Louisiana immediately halted an ongoing election to draw out the Black district that existed. Right. Well, we're seeing that in Tennessee, where last redistricting, they already cut Nashville in 3. This one, they plan to cut Memphis in 3, right? It is a systematic attack, and it's going to take a systematic approach to actually address it. So you see a lot of people talking about John R. Lewis, right? The voting rights, expanding voter rights. I think that's important, but I think that we have to get at the root cause, which is the courts itself, the Supreme Court that enshrines power in a handful of people for life, no matter how entangled they are with donors, no matter how many millions of dollars Paul Singer gives them, how many flights and yacht trips they are able to take. They are serving for life, no matter how many cases they have not recused themselves from that directly deal with people who they have had business with. They serve for life, no matter how many precedents they just destroy and demolish. They serve for life. And that is a kink in the system, right? It was not supposed to be that way. These people were not even supposed to live this long when the framers of the Constitution, when the founding fathers conceived the highest courts of the land.
Right.
I do not believe that this was the intention. So to get at that is going to be of utmost importance. So that looks like, and we have seen things expanding the court, of course, right, to immediately counterbalance, just the negative impact of just unqualified activists, white supremacist conservatives. Term limits is an immediate action that we should take. These people should not serve for life. We don't serve for life. The executive does not serve for life. We have to answer to people. We have to answer to the times that we live in. We have to shift with the times, and they don't have to, right? Making sure that there are ethical standards for court, for justices. Those are all things. And that brings us to the back to the legislative branch.
Right.
Filibuster. We need to create the tools, the legislative tools to actually transform the courts. So I think all of those things are a part of the conversation. I think it's incredibly important that we recognize that there's ever a time to pull those triggers, that this has to be it. And if this isn't it, we will not have time to come back and remedy this. If they are able to succeed in taking the entire South, we won't get a gavel back. And that is their intention. That has been their intention from the beginning.
Yes. Okay, I so appreciate all of that, and also just tying it back together into this ideal that we need a package that transforms all three branches, and in particular, how corrupt this court has become. Yeah. Okay, well, I have so appreciated this conversation. We've been wide ranging. We've talked about corporate corruption. We've talked about oligarchy. We've talked about money in politics. We've talked about voting rights. We've talked about the crises of this moment. But most importantly, all this abuse of power, everything we're seeing, how we can tie it back together, working together, organizations like Public Citizen and your team and your incredible work on the Hill to try to push, some of these reforms through so that we can fix some of what we're talking about. For folks who are watching, that's what this Substack is all about. There are these huge problems, but how we can also deal with them. Informed resistance. So sign up for our Substack if you haven't yet. Congressman Lee, do you want to tell our audience where they can find more about your Substack or your legislative work?
Yeah. So here, obviously, Rep. Summer Lee is our Substack. We're on, I think, all platforms. Please find us on those platforms. We are on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're probably on Threads. We're on Facebook because we do not discriminate, right? No, we have, we're on TV. We are going anywhere that we can to organize, to talk about these things, to lift up these issues, and really try to spark the same urgent flame that they are sparking against us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. So appreciate it. We will, I'm sure, talk again soon as we keep fighting this fight together. Thanks, everyone.